Good day, folks. Thank you for joining us here at Your Health. On today's program, we have scientific updates on probiotics. We're going to talk about intestinal dysbiosis, altered intestinal flora, and the powerful role that probiotics play in restoring your health. Really interesting stuff today. Please stay tuned for that. But first, let's go to our news. Let's see what's happening in the health world. Reheating cooking oils produces toxic substances that increase the risk of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. New research from Spain, published in the journal Food Chemistry, has a warning about the practice of reusing oil to fry food. The study discovered that when vegetable oils such as safflower, sunflower, flaxseed, and olive oil are reheated, they produce a toxic class of chemicals called aldehydes, such as formaldehyde, which are known to cause neurodegenerative diseases. Of the oils tested, safflower oil reheating created the highest levels of aldehydes, while olive oil created the least. Folks, you may be thinking, well, what's the problem? I use frying oil once and then I'm done with it. I throw it out. But understand, every fast food restaurant in America reheats their frying oils repeatedly. They are creating these toxic aldehyde chemicals that become incorporated into their foods and hence into your body. And rest assured, many of these aldehydes are toxic to our brains and other organs, and formaldehyde is just one example. Also, when we fry carbohydrates such as batter or French fries in these same oils, it creates what scientists call advanced glycation end products that also cause serious damage to delicate tissues, damage very similar to that which occurs in a diabetic with runaway blood sugars. So the evidence is mounting. Frying foods, especially in reheated oils, creates toxic chemicals that will compromise your health. Taking a probiotic prior to X-ray treatment protects from radiation damage. Using an animal model, researchers from St. Louis University found mice that had been treated with probiotics prior to radiation exposure had less damage to normal tissues after radiation therapy was completed. The team of scientists also discovered the mechanism by which probiotics protect the intestines from radiation damage. The researchers found probiotics maximize the normal production of intestine-protecting prostaglandins. Now, folks, I cannot tell you how many times I've been asked how to treat the complications and side effects of cancer radiation therapy. The truth is, very little can be done after radiation causes this damage to the intestinal lining. The best treatment is to prevent the damage in the first place. And this new study from St. Louis University shows, at least in animals, that probiotics help to prevent radiation damage and the terrible symptoms of diarrhea and abdominal pain that radiation can create. Folks, this is important. Please pay attention to this. If you or a loved one is scheduled to receive radiation therapy for cancer, please let them know taking probiotics before radiation starts will help to spare them much misery. We also know there are several other dietary supplements that have been shown to protect normal tissues from radiation damage while leaving the diseased cancer cells susceptible to the effects of radiation. These include the medicinal mushrooms and beta-glucans in general, noni juice, royal jelly from the honeybee, curcumin from turmeric, and alpha-lipoic acid, and yes, they all work best when taken before radiation exposure. Well, today on Your Health, we'd like to discuss further the remarkable attributes of probiotics. It is true, good health begins and ends in the intestinal tract. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Well, today's show's great. We're going to talk about probiotics. And you know what they say, good health begins in your intestines. Richard, we're learning more about this every day.
Every day.
There's more studies that come out. And 10 years ago, well, maybe a little bit more, when we started studying about probiotics and intestinal health, there wasn't much information out there.
Not much.
And now it's just exploded.
10 years ago, when we started talking about this, there were 30 articles at the National Institutes of Health. Now there are over 8,000 in just 10 years. So it's exploding. It's really a fascinating time to be following the development of the gut flora, intestinal dysbiosis, and the use of probiotics to help our health. You know, gastrointestinal disease and complaints are so common. Everyone's had a tummy ache. We've all had a tummy ache. It's the third most common reason to see a doctor. At least 60 million people suffer in the United States from chronic intestinal issues. And these gastrointestinal problems are associated with the vast majority of our chronic degenerative diseases, okay? GI medications, intestinal medications, you know, your acid blockers and your antacids and your fiber agents and your laxatives, they are consistently among the top selling prescription and over-the-counter items. But you know, these medicines, although they can be immensely helpful and relieve pain and suffering, they really don't fix the underlying problem. And if we rely on them long-term, we now know you can lead into serious health compromise due to the side effects of the medicine, blocked absorption of nutrients and this type of thing. So if we can get to the core problem, it's always best, folks. Intestinal bacteria plays a critical role in the function of the intestinal tract. A new scientific report was issued in Nature magazine. Scientists from 7 countries mapped out the genetic composition of 124 healthy subjects' intestinal bacteria. Okay? This is really interesting. They found that you at home, we all of us have this, have 100 times the number of microbial genes in our intestines than in our entire body. 100 times that level. 10 times the number of bacteria than human cells. This huge accumulation of genetic material has been referred to as the second genome, okay? And what they have found about this diversity is really amazing. This is the most current finding. You know, we've said they suspect there's 300. They suspect there's 500, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. We hear all these figures. Well, get this now. What they've learned is the typical person has between 300 and 500 different bacteria in their intestinal tract. But if you added up all the different types of bacteria from a ribosomal RNA assay, they found that there are as many as 30,000 different types of bacteria in all humanity's intestinal tract. 30,000, okay? Now, the typical has 300 to 500, but 99% of that 300 to 500 are represented in 30 species. So you have this 30, that is the vast bulk of your intestinal flora, and then that small segment can be anywhere up to 30,000 different organisms. Isn't that amazing?
That is truly amazing.
Yeah, it really is. So that really is something. So not only do you have great diversity in the species of bacteria, but these all bacteria and other life forms, yeast and whatnot, they all create chemicals. Okay? Now get this, University of British Columbia did some research. They analyzed the chemical composition of mice feces. Not a glamorous study, but critical information nonetheless. When they did this chemical analysis of mice feces, they assessed over 2,000 different chemicals from these mice, all from their bacteria. Then they gave these mice 1 round of antibiotics, just 1 round, okay? Then they reassessed the chemical composition of their gut flora, okay? What they found out was of those 2,000 different chemicals, 1,750 of them were altered. So 7 out of 8 chemicals were altered. And they found they were either increased or decreased by a factor of 2-fold to 10,000-fold. So you can have dramatic swings in this chemical milieu, this soup that's in our intestinal tract. And they found the most affected systems due to this chemical change were changes in the hormone system, changes in the inflammatory system, okay? Changes in the carbohydrate and fat metabolism system, the bile production, and the recycling of blood components. Those areas, those physiologic areas were the most profoundly affected by 1 course of antibiotic, okay? So we can tell from this study alone the profound effect of altered bowel flora. The chemistry completely changes. Well, folks, a healthy intestinal tract is vital to health. Our intestinal microbes and the intestinal tract in general are responsible for the digestion of nutrients into usable portions, usable units. Our intestinal bacteria make short-chain fatty acids that are oils that our gut requires for life. Butyric acid is one of them. That's just one example. The colon can't work right without it, and our intestinal bacteria makes that. The intestinal bacteria recycles mucus and blood products. Nothing's wasted in the body. We're the original recyclers. You know, we got it right first. We use everything we can over and over again if it's to our benefit. It uses a fermentation of food to release energy, manufacturing of vitamins. All of this is done by our intestinal bacteria. B1, thiamine, B12, vitamin K, and others can be manufactured by our intestinal flora. It is our primary immune barrier. Remember, 70% of our immune system is right here in the intestinal tract. The bacteria give the immune system continual exposure that leads to immune competence. When the exposure of this bacteria, when this bacteria is not right, we know for a fact that our babies, our little ones, never develop a competent immune system, and they become racked with allergies and food sensitivities and eczema and asthma. Terrible things happen when this gut flora is not right to children. Continued exposure, yes. Waste elimination, it's involved in getting rid of stuff. That one's pretty evident. Detoxification of noxious elements. That study of the 2,000 chemicals helps us to understand that. It is truly one of the great complexities of the human organism. 30,000 different potential species. Now, the brain's complex, but the diversity of population may even exceed the gut than the brain. So it's really fascinating, that whole thing. Over 50% of the stool weight is bacteria. 2 to 3 pounds of microbes in the typical adult. It's critical in the development of the immune system, and it plays a role in so many different body systems. It's totally amazing. Even our ideal weight is influenced by our bowel flora, even our mood. And as proof of this, have you ever come down with a flu bug, an intestinal flu bug, and you notice you feel blue and depressed? Oh, why has it happened to me? Here I am miserable. It's going to take me a week. I'm going to miss work. You know, you're depressed. When gut flora changes, it affects the mind. And this is a new emerging field in probiotics and dysbiosis study, is how it affects the mind. And maybe there are new treatments for depression that could come out of this, and I'm sure it will be. I'm sure there will be. Now, when we talk about dysbiosis, intestinal dysbiosis, we're talking about altered bowel flora. It's not normal anymore. It's causing us problems. The taking of probiotics to correct this altered bowel flora is not a new thought. Fermented milk, curd, yogurt, and other probiotic measures have been used by humanity for 5,000 years. Okay? It's a biblical food, curd. It's mentioned in the Bible, okay? In 1908, Eli Mechnikov, the brilliant Russian scientist, proposed that you could ingest lactobacillus and it would displace toxin-producing bacteria from the intestinal tract, and it leads to good health and a long life. He won a Nobel Prize for that. And from that time forward, the scientific community has been hard at work helping us to understand the role of this. These people believed, Mechnikov and his group believed, that good health came from eating Bulgarian yogurt. He studied a group of Bulgarians who lived to be 100 years of age, and he isolated Lactobacillus bulgaricus from their yogurt, and he attributed long life and good health to that one bacteria. We know it's more complicated than that, but that's where the ball started rolling in the modern era. Over the last 100 years, the world scientific community has spent considerable resources to continue Mechnikov's work. In the United States, it was virtually ignored till about the year 1995, 2000. Virtually ignored, and that is really a sad state. But as you all know, you put the might of American scientific community behind a project, we're going to learn a lot fast. And now we have 8,000, and there's probably another 5,000 articles, just projects, just waiting to come in right now. All right? Intestinal dysbiosis. When we return from this break, let's talk about things that you can understand to help identify if you are plagued with dysbiosis. You probably are, but let's get those key facts when we return.
We're back, everyone, talking about intestinal dysbiosis and probiotics. Isn't this interesting? Richard, let's explain to everybody exactly what intestinal dysbiosis is, what we mean by that, and then what are the signs that maybe we suffer from it?
Well, this would help us to decide if we need help in that area,
right,
which is critical. Intestinal dysbiosis is a condition of abnormal intestinal microbe growth that can create toxic and even potentially carcinogenic, cancer-causing compounds. This can just be an imbalance of the microbes, okay? It can be an overgrowth, a considerably disturbed imbalance, or it can be an outright infection where you have only one bad organism growing and it suppresses the growth of everything. It can be anywhere in that range. That is intestinal dysbiosis. This condition will lead to disturbed digestion. You might notice all of a sudden that you're intolerant of dairy. I could always drink dairy, but after I took those antibiotics, I've been gassy ever since. That's classic. I've heard that 100 times. That's typical. You may have malabsorption of nutrients. I'm taking my vitamins, but I don't think they're working. What's wrong with me? I'm not getting out of my food what I need. Inflammation of the intestines and distant organs. This is your leaky gut syndrome. And believe me, folks, we have evidence from the beginning to end on this leaky gut theory. It's not theory anymore. We know so much more about this. The evidence is there, the facts are there. We know that leaky gut exists. This leads to suppressed immune function, one cold after another. You're losing the battle with cancer. You know, your immune system isn't working like it should. Hypervigilant immune system, the autoimmune phenomena. Yes, leaky gut dysbiosis can lead to autoimmune disease. How are you ever going to get well if you don't fix that intestine first? Okay? Altered cholesterol-based hormones. Remember the milieu of chemistry, one course of antibiotics to the mice, and it altered their cholesterol and hormone systems. Okay, dramatically altered that. It happens in humans too. Altered mineral and electrolyte balance. You can't keep your magnesium up. You're taking magnesium, but it stays low, and you're achy and sore. You hurt everywhere. This is typical in dysbiosis. Disturbed carbohydrate metabolism. We know diabetics, pre-diabetes, you have altered bowel flora, and we know if we can get that bowel flora back, it will help you avoid the end effect of diabetes. Yeah, we know that much now. It's really quite amazing. And also altered mood and even depression. We've also learned about that. Now, signs of intestinal dysbiosis. What could happen to you if you have dysbiosis? You may have the recurrent colds, recurrent viral illnesses, you know, the cold sore one after another. What's going on here? I'm not stressed, but my immune system can't keep that cold sore away. Food intolerances, allergies. You may have weight gain or weight loss. You know, honey, usually in critically ill patients, we think of it as losing weight. But with dysbiosis, you more often gain weight. You puff up because of this altered metabolism that occurs with dysbiosis. So I don't know why I'm gaining weight. I'm eating like a bird. How many of you say that? I've heard that 100 times as well. And we used to say, yeah, you just don't realize how much you are eating, chubby. That's not right at all. We were wrong with that notion. It's altered bowel flora. Now, maintaining ideal weight requires some discipline. I understand that. But if the bowel flora is right, you'd be amazed how much easier it is to stay trim. It's amazing. This is power, folks. This is going to help you maintain your ideal weight. You may have constipation if you have dysbiosis. There could be diarrhea. It's the whole gamut. You may have IBS. You may have lactose intolerance, fatigue, very common with dysbiosis. Headaches, this we see a lot, especially when you combine the nutrient malabsorption. You know, low in your magnesium and other factors with the dysbiosis, all that was toxic chemicals, 10,000 increase of fold concentration of some of these chemicals. Yeah, it's going to cause you a headache. It's a toxic headache. That's what happens in this. Yeast infection, one after another, fungal skin infections, can't get rid of that athlete's foot, common autoimmune disease. Oh no, my ANA titers are going up. What am I going to do? Doctor says this is genetic. We all have that in us. We all have the potential to develop autoimmune disease. If we can get to you early before the joints are destroyed, before the vascular tree is so inflamed that it's sclerotic, we can reverse a lot of this, okay? So keep this in mind. Metabolic syndrome, another sign of dysbiosis, and really just basically a history of one disease after another. You know, how many times we see this? I'm on 12 medicines, I got this long list of diagnoses. Well, really, you know, the whole list says, what's the one thing that explains that whole list? And dysbiosis is it more often than not, folks. So I hope I've convinced you that this could be happening to you. It's fundamental for all of us to maintain good health and prevent disease. Now, what will cause this profound disturbance of bowel flora? We need to know these causes and reasons, not only to identify if you have the problem, but to help prevent the problem in the future. Malnourishment and poor eating habits. Up to 80% of all Americans never eat raw food. Raw food has microbes on it. We ingest those, that's part of our normal flora. That's supposed to be that way. You never eat raw food? As we get older, it's harder to digest raw food. And if you have dysbiosis, it's really hard to digest food. But we have to introduce these raw foods slowly and help you adapt to it while we're doing our probiotic therapy. Get your gut back in line so it can handle raw foods. It's essential. It's important. Chlorinated and fluoridated water. We put chlorine in the water to keep sepsis, you know, septic contamination, fecal contamination out of the water supply. That's a good thing. It saves millions of lives. There's no doubt about it. But can you filter that chlorine out before you drink it? If you can, it'll help restore normal bowel flora because it affects your gut flora, as does fluoridated water. Both of them can. Obesity. Put on weight, that can lead to dysbiosis. Dysbiosis can lead to obesity, both. Diabetes. Diabetes leads to dysbiosis. Dysbiosis can lead to diabetes. See that cycle, how it all interplays together? If that's in your history, you're susceptible to dysbiosis. Do you have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease? You know, you put on the weight, you're pre-diabetic, you got a little fat in there. That causes dysbiosis. The resulting dysbiosis further irritates the liver, leading to cirrhosis. We got to stop that. You're not going to ever get well with a bad liver. It's impossible. So we have to protect that liver. Antibiotic use. Who amongst us has not used an antibiotic? Boy, occasionally we meet one or two, but it is so widespread. University of Michigan did a very interesting study. One course of a cephalosporin, that's like your Keflex, you know, that class. One course of cephalosporin antibiotic caused intestinal dysbiosis that never corrected itself over an 11-month study. They're still following these patients, and they will issue, you know, at 2 years, 3 years, what is happening. But at a year, basically, the dysbiosis had not fixed itself from just one round of antibiotics. So think about it. Pain medicine, particularly narcotics, but also the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. It alters the defense mechanism of the intestinal life. That's why aspirin, ibuprofen can give you a stomach ache. You know, it burns. In some people, it's really bad for some people. That can happen without you realizing there's pain and discomfort. It can set you up for dysbiosis. Even Tylenol, acetaminophen, can lead to dysbiosis. That study was done about 6, 7 years ago. So pain medicine, for some reason, and they've clarified all this, can lead to dysbiosis. Keep that in mind. Now, I want you to have pain relief, but I think you'll find if you correct the dysbiosis, your pain level drops dramatically because dysbiosis causes inflammation throughout the body. What else? Aging. Just getting older leads to susceptibility. Stress. Stress, university, let's see, Ohio State University. Stress increases Clostridium bacteria and decreases Bacteroides by 20 to 25%. Clostridia is associated with tetanus, gas gangrene, pseudomembranous colitis. Clostridia is a deadly group of bacteria, and you can get it overgrowth in your gut. And there is even a connection between the Clostridia and rheumatoid arthritis initiation. Okay, that goes way back to 1984. This is Russian study that very few people ever read, but I remember it. Okay, travel, exposure to new ecosystems. You know, everyone's heard go to Mexico. Oh, I came back with turista. Any travel, but even in the United States, you can pick up these organisms. So if you travel for a living, you're much more likely to create a dysbiotic state. Weakened immune system, for whatever reason, okay? And all of these contribute to the destruction of normal flora and the state of dysbiosis. Now, before we go to our break, let's talk a little bit about some of our solutions. We want to talk about probiotics particularly. Probiotic means for life. These are friendly, helpful, beneficial bacteria. Sometimes diet is not enough. Now, I strongly urge you to find the fermented dairy that you can tolerate. Maybe it's yogurt. Maybe it's the old-fashioned buttermilk, sour cream, cottage cheese, kefir. Maybe you need to go out of cow's milk and go into goat milk. It's better tolerated. Even sheep milk. These are all unguenate milks that are okay to use. They're dairy products. Use them in a fermented way. You may not react to them like you do to cow's milk, but you've got to find the food, the fermented dairy that works. Then we add probiotics to that, and we'll explain that when we return.
Well, this talk on probiotics is so interesting. I learn something new every time we do this. Now, Richard has some research studies that are probably going to shock you. Some of them are so interesting. Richard, every time, like you said, you go to the sites, you see new stories.
Oh, yes. Every day there's something new on probiotics in the scientific journals. It is a most rewarding time to be alive in science in this area, and curcumin too, and so many of them. It's really phenomenal what God has given us. We're going to talk about research conducted on probiotics, and we're talking about it in a generic, general sense. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of strains of probiotics, and it's just, for our limited time, we can't just talk about Lactobacillus acidophilus. We're talking about all of them in our discussion. This is basically a scientific discussion of the history of discovery of probiotics. One of the first studies, Marie Curie Hospital in Poland, they looked at irritable bowel syndrome. They did a double-blind, placebo-controlled study on 40 controls. They found that 95% of the IBS patients improved. They improved, and 100% had a reduction in pain with IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. That's just tremendous for IBS patients. Now, this Clostridium difficile, this is your pseudomembranous colitis. This is a severe form of diarrhea associated with antibiotic use. 250,000 reported cases every year, more cases than influenza. More hospital admissions than influenza, but you may not have even ever heard of it. Okay, you take too many antibiotics, you're going to hear of it. You're going to hear of it in a bad way. A study was reported in the American Journal of Gastroenterology. Your gastroenterologist in your community gets that journal. If he's not doing this, well, I feel sorry for him. He's behind. Here's what they did. 225 patients, all of them were given antibiotics. They also either received, with that antibiotic, a low-dose probiotic, high-dose probiotic, or a placebo, a dummy pill, okay? They found that 24% of those who took antibiotics with the placebo, 24% developed this pseudomembranous colitis, which can be lethal, okay? They found the low-dose probiotic with antibiotic, only 10%. 24 versus 10, dropped down to 10%. And if they took a high dose of probiotic, overwhelmed their system like we recommend you do, only 1.2% developed pseudomembranous colitis. Isn't that amazing? Now, I'm often asked, I'm on an antibiotic, I have to take it. Sometimes you have to do that. And should I take a probiotic with it because that antibiotic's just going to kill the probiotic? This study should answer that question for you. Even though that antibiotic may kill off your lactobacillus, your probiotic, whatever strain you're taking, there are still benefits. If you're taking 1 dose of antibiotic a day, say take it that in the morning. In the evening, take your probiotic. If you're taking 4 doses a day, and there's some antibiotics that you have to take up to 4 times a day, just take it with the antibiotic. The research says there is benefit. Don't wait till it's done. The damage will be too great then. It's harder to fix then. You can take it with an antibiotic. It's optimal to stagger your dose, but with higher dosages, you can't do that. So just take it with it. It's okay. All right? Here's a continuum on C. difficile, the pseudomembranous colitis organism. They found babies, neonates, okay? They develop C. diff growth in their gut if they do not have Bifidobacterium longum in their intestinal tracts. Kids with B. longum, that probiotic, they don't go on to develop this overgrowth of C. diff. We are going to have a population with huge susceptibility to C. diff, and those numbers are increasing of C. diff as our young people get older and older because they're all overwhelmed with this C. diff in their gut. All they need is 1 course of antibiotic, and we're going to have astounding rates of the pseudomembranous colitis. We can reverse that trend with probiotics. Next subject, pouchitis. This is important. If you ever have a colon tumor or ulcerative colitis, the doctor may need to take out a part of your colon. And when they take and put that back together, they're trying to create a little pouch to act as your rectum to hold stool until it's appropriate to void, okay? Well, this junction, this connection is highly susceptible to inflammation, to dysbiosis, because you're put on antibiotics for it. They found that if you give these, it's called an ileal J pouch anastomosis for your doctors. You know what I'm talking about. They found 50% develop severe inflammation, so much so that it threatens their life, and it definitely affects their quality of life. If you give those folks probiotics, it dramatically reduces this propensity to pouchitis. And not just a 10% reduction. We're talking about a dramatic drop in this. So it's helpful even for intestinal surgeries, okay? H. pylori, the ulcer-causing germ of the stomach. You will be more likely to eradicate that germ if you take probiotics with your therapies your doctor gives you. That's been proven multiple times, okay? Acute gastritis, traveler's diarrhea, food poisoning, intestinal viruses. These have been studied multiple times in multiple research centers, and they've been able to prove probiotics shorten the course, if you get it, and lessen your susceptibility to it, okay? At the American College of Gastroenterology's 76th meeting, they presented 4 studies in a lecture, a certain lecture, and it was probiotic related. They showed probiotics improve antibiotic diarrhea. It improves ulcerative colitis. They improve irritable bowel syndrome. They improve psoriasis and chronic fatigue. This is mainstream now, folks. Okay? Inflammatory bowel disease, this was done in China, found probiotics reduce the symptoms of inflammatory bowel disease. We're talking ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. The probiotics release butyric acid, which calms gut function. Now, Observational studies find these keys, but we're to the point now, the studies are coming in that explain how that connection works. That's further evidence to the validity of probiotic therapy. Celiac disease patients who take probiotics improve their inflammatory state. Postpartum weight gain, University of Turku in Finland found women that take probiotics during the first trimester of their pregnancy are less likely to be overweight 1 year after birth of their child, okay? Gastric bypass, those who take probiotics lose weight better, fewer complications. American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, gut modulates nutrients, absorption by the presence of certain probiotic bacteria. What the point of that was, if you're on a weight reducing plan, if you take probiotics, you're gonna lose more weight. It's easier to lose the weight. Nutrition and metabolism, as omega-3s decrease in your diet, so do lactobacillus and the bacteria. So this study alone told us it's important to take your omega-3s with your probiotics because it helps them sustain in the gut. Boy, we have a break, but we have more when we return. Come back with us because we're going to talk about children's health next.
We're back, everyone, talking about probiotics. Now we're going to turn the tables a little bit and talk about our children, how important probiotics are to their young health.
Yeah.
Richard, you know we can't forget the children.
No, they're our future. We're charged with a responsibility. We need to take that seriously. Immune response in children. Mothers who take probiotics while they're pregnant have babies who develop better immunity after vaccinations. We have multiple studies now that while in utero, if mother is paying close attention and doing the right things, their children will have a better immune system. They're better protected from horrendous diseases if they have immunizations. And even if they don't, they have better immune systems. That's been established. How about colic? How many of you have had colicky babies? You know, new mothers, they don't quite know what to do. It's a scary time. Well, we have multiple studies. This one was University of Texas. Colicky babies have overgrowth of intestinal Klebsiella. That family of germ causes urinary tract infections and severe pneumonias. It can be a real bad germ. And when babies are overwhelmed with it, they get colicky. Makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Dramatic reduction in crying time. This has been repeated in several studies. I found a review study from the University of De Lyon in France. I hope I said that right. De Lyon, isn't that how you say it? They did a review of all the research on colic for babies. Pay attention, doctors and nurses. They found that hydrolyzed formula, it's a digested formula, so it relieves the burden of the gut for the new ones, the little babies. Hydrolyzed formula, probiotics, and fennel extracts are the absolute best treatments for colic. Okay, pretty neat, isn't it? Probiotics, integral to colic therapy for babies. And it helps mamas too, they can get some rest, you know, poor things. Eczema, probiotics taking during pregnancy and during the breastfeeding phase of child rearing helps protect the baby from eczema, all right? Probiotics provides infants with stronger immune system that resist infection and allergies. That's University of Illinois. Food allergies. Probiotic reduces food allergy-related dermatitis in 10 infants. They followed 10 infants, and that's a small study, but it will be followed, I assure you, and this day we'll find the same thing, because this has been done several times now. Gestational diabetes, probiotics during pregnancy lowers your risk of gestational diabetes. Isn't that amazing? And may lower childhood obesity rate. Okay, probiotics, who would have thought? IBS in children helps with that. Constipation is another common problem, especially when the children go off to school. Their patterns, their habits are altered, they're embarrassed. You know, that's a typical scenario that can lead to really bad constipation for the little ones. Give them probiotics. It increases their frequency of stool, gets them right again. Probiotics and childhood constipation. Professors of pediatric medicine are popping up all over the country saying probiotics are safe for infants. Only in rare situations where their immune system has been knocked out, such as leukemia. Sometimes you have to wipe out the immune system in order to treat the leukemia and transplant bone marrow. In a setting like that, you've got to be careful with probiotics. But every other kid is fine. You know, it's yogurt. Kids can have yogurt. As soon as they're eating solid foods, you know, it's six months and on, they can have probiotics. And before that, you can give it as a supplement in their formula or in their water bottle. Crush it up, put it in, it's fine. How about immunity? Allergies, we've talked about that. UTI, maybe that's your problem. Probiotics hasten the recovery and prevents reoccurrence of urinary tract infections. This is really big. I can honestly tell you, folks, I've never been able to break the cycle of recurrent UTIs urinary tract infections if we don't add probiotics to it. It's virtually impossible to do without them. So please include that first. Drink more water in your cranberry. Those things are important too. They're all very helpful. But the probiotic, because here's the reason, basic reason. 99% of all urinary tract infections come from colon bacteria, all right? They migrate into the urinary tract, and they can do it through the blood or through direct migration. They can do it either way, okay? And so if you realign the bowel flora, you're getting rid of those bad guys, the E. coli's that tend to cause these infections. Probiotics, very important for that. Bacterial vaginosis, relapse rate go down with probiotics. Influenza, you can get a higher antibody level to your influenza from probiotics than from the vaccine. You believe that? And we line them up to give these vaccines. That's a whole nother subject. I digress. I apologize. Probiotics help your immune system. Missed work days. Is this the problem? You know, you're finally getting above water here. You know, the finances are finally starting to recover from this recession, but now you're sick all the time and you're missing work. Get this. Swedish study. Workers that took probiotics had 1/5 the number of sick days, just from probiotics. You can reduce your cancer risk. University of Ulster found that. In Egypt, lactobacillus probiotics appear to reduce the toxicity of aflatoxins and the risk of primary liver cancer. Aflatoxins made by mold and fungus. It's a mycotoxin that can cause liver cancer. It's the #1 cause of primary liver cancer worldwide. And it's a huge problem in developing countries, less so in America, but worldwide it's a terrible problem. And they found that probiotics reduces that risk. Pretty amazing. Critical care, this one's really important. Closed head trauma. Folks, this is your classic motorcycle accident where the damage to the head is so severe that they're near brain dead. We've all heard of this. It's very expensive to care for them. Months in the hospital, hoping they recover. And the Journal of Critical Care Journal of Medical Investigation found if we give closed head trauma patients probiotics, it resulted in fewer complications of infection in the ICU. Cheap, easy way to lower our healthcare costs. Closed head trauma, wow. We also learned, this is a fish study, that lactobacillus, lactic acid bacteria, are effective chelators of heavy metals. This is kind of a new area. We'll see more about this in the future. Let's see. Bioassays, but Texas Tech. There you go, Red Raiders, isn't it? Texas Tech, Red Raiders, go Raiders. They found, they're exploring, they're making it a priority to do the gut-brain connection. And they've developed a whole line of studies to help us understand if we could treat depression better with probiotics. It's my suspicion, from my experience and study, that we're going to find this is a revolutionary way to help people with depression. So, boy, I tell you, other conditions before the break, recurrent urogenital candida and yeast infections, probiotics help. Elevated cholesterol, probiotics help. Kidney stones, heartburn, absolutely. This is a big area for probiotics. High blood pressure, nutrient depletion, now you know why. You know why that can happen. Lactose intolerance, you know why. Tooth decay, even tooth decay. Isn't it amazing? It's amazing. Arthritis, absolutely. Preeclampsia, you know, the high blood pressure, extreme high blood pressure, pregnancy, heart disease, and even chronic pain. You're up to date now. You're up to date. But don't sit on your laurels, because we'll get 10 new research studies today. We'll keep you up to speed with it. We have a break. We'll be right back.
Now, the probiotics, isn't this interesting? Richard has put together a custom blend for you, which was so much fun. He did so much research to pick the strains that we need to help us the most. This is made in a really special way. Richard, let's tell everyone about this live count technology and why you put that.
Well, live count is a method of putting the bacteria to sleep, so to speak. They're not killed, they're put in stasis, so they're not metabolically active. That way they can live longer without refrigeration, okay? That's what we call the live count. Once it hits your intestinal tract and becomes hydrated, they wake up and go to work.
There you go.
Right? And the gastrodefense is a patented method of shielding the probiotic from your stomach acid. Now, Lactobacillus acidophilus means acid-loving bacteria, but they're not all highly tolerant of acid. So if you can protect them from that acid, higher numbers get through that caustic part of the intestinal tract and on down to where we need to do what it needs to be
done. And that is really
right?
genius. I think that is why that's what sets it apart.
It really does. And when you take this, I can just tell you what I've experienced. When you take this probiotic, you feel it.
That's right.
There are a lot of them out there that says, did I take my probiotic? I can't tell. With this one, you feel it. It is quite remarkable. Now, how did we settle on the strains of bacteria? Well, after several years of listening to your health questions, I made a list. This is what our people are suffering from. Let's go to the research and match up the probiotic strains with your conditions. I know what you got. You've told me. I've been paying attention. So we put the right bacteria in there just for you. Then we also have for the babies, babies have to have lactobacillus and bifidobacterium representatives in their intestinal tract. If they don't have it, trouble is sure to follow. So we weighted it heavily with lactobacillus and the bifidobacterium, giving several samples of each of those in that line, chewable. For little tykes, you can crush it and put it right in their formula or water.
And we can take it too.
And we can take it too. Adults can take it too. It's outstanding. Well, folks, I did my best. I hope you understand the critical importance of probiotics in correcting dysbiosis. Thank you for joining us. Hope to see you tomorrow.
Thank you. Bye-bye.